Okay. Clear on selling scrap.
Here, we are recording.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
great. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mayor Mike Wickers. This is the Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022 Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. So thank you all for being here. The first item on our agenda today is a review of our business meeting agenda. I have asked our Director of Community and Economic Development, Mike Johnson, to lead us in the pledge. We have scheduled a citizen comment period. From there, we will move to 5 legislative items tonight. The first one that we will consider is consideration of resolution 2022-23, adopting a tentative budget for the period of July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Providing for public inspection of such budget, establishing the time and place of a public hearing to consider adoption of such budget, and providing for public notice of such hearing. This is an item that we will cover in our staff report, so we won't address it here. So we'll come back to that soon. The next item tonight will be 4.2, consideration of resolution 2022-24, declaring police canine flex surplus and authorizing sale to Officer Trey Brimhall. And I'll have Chief Russo, if you want, give us some background on that right now. That's okay.
Sure. Officer Brimhall has been with us for a few years. He's in our canine unit. He operates Flex, which is his police service dog. Flex is he a Malinois? So he's got a 4.5-year-old Malinois that's fully trained. These, as you know, canines live with the handlers and they work with them, and they're the partners, and normally you develop a close relationship with a pet. It's even stronger when that pet is your partner and goes through dark alleys and homes with you, and can typically save your life. We even have buttons on their belt, so if they get to a fight or tussle, they can hit the button, the dog will be released from the cage and save you.
Yeah.
So he's developed an emotional attachment to the dog, and he is quitting to go into a business doing construction excavation with his father. He's going to continue as a reserve, but he doesn't want to leave the dog behind. The dog is actually a tool, property of the city, to think of in that way. So there is some, consideration that we have value to the taxpayer. We're asking to sell the dog. He's willing to buy the dog. He actually offered to buy the dog. The replacement cost on a dog, I know this is just scary because everyone's going to say, I know they're like $2,000 or $3,000. No, sir, they are $10,500 for a new dog, and that's what he's willing to pay to replace this animal. We have one from a breeder that we like for his replacement that we matched up because the dog's big. Actually, so that said, we're asking you to grant his wish. We let him keep the dog, and he will reimburse the city at full costing of the $10,500, which will cost us to replace the dog.
Okay. Thank you. But that's a man who loves his dog. So
I'm just trying to think if my wife would let me spend $10,000.
my wife's not paying $10,000 for me.
And just to note, we had
Oh, yes, she would.
the original agenda had the 11,000. That was an error. It's 10,500, and so the resolution is for the 10,500. Just to let you know.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. We're not going to let you go anywhere because the next item tonight will be consideration of resolution 2022-25, awarding a retiring police officer's badge and approving his purchase of a police firearm. So we'll have you give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, I could do that very quickly. So Officer Steve Olson had a career with Salt Lake City and then came over to us when we became the police department. Has a total of 42 years of service.
Wow.
In police work. He is elected to take his retirement and actually enjoy the fruits of his labor. Traditionally, those who leave us in good standing, we award their firearm to them and their badge. The badge has been placed in a plaque with his tagging and their memorabilia, and we would ask that you surplus the weapon, allow us to award it to him in recognition of his service to the citizens.
How long has that Officer Olson been with us?
He started with us day one, so
Okay.
almost 15 years.
A
right?
great employee.
So,
Yeah. Great,
yeah.
great. Thank you for that background. Okay, next item tonight that we will consider is Resolution 2022-26, approving entry into a lease purchase agreement with Zions Van Corporation for the lease of police and public works vehicles and associated equipment, and authorizing the execution and delivery of all related documents and the taking of all required actions. That is also something that we'll discuss in our staff report, so we'll hold off on that. The next item that we have, the last legislative item rather for this evening, is consideration of Resolution 2020-27, approving entry into a vehicle repurchase option agreement with Garf Enterprises, Inc. for police and public works vehicles and associated equipment. And we will also hold off on that, as that is will be one of our, we'll talk about that with our staff under our staff report. The last item tonight will just be the approval of the consent calendar, which is the minutes for April 19th for our work session and business meeting. Okay. So we are going to make a slight adjustment to our agenda and move to item number 4, which is we have the privilege to have Google Fiber with us today. We have Jacob Brace, who is the Government and Community Affairs Manager, along with the General Manager for a specific area, right? The Western region. Ashley Church is here with us. And so we are going to invite them up and we will listen to a presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Take these 2 chairs.
Great. Give a few minutes for Jacob to get set up here. Not yet. Did you share? Well, thank you for having us. As the mayor introduced, my name is Ashley Church. I'm the general manager here in the West region. I oversee operations in Utah and Orange County, California, as well as our future expansion across all of those regions, as well as what we're hoping to look into here in the near future in the West. Today, I'm going to actually kick it over to Jacob. You can introduce yourself.
Jacob Brace, Head of Government and Community Affairs here in the West region as well, predominantly in the state of Utah, live over in Mill Creek and have been a resident for 22 years in the state. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm also a resident of Mill Creek here. I've been with Google Fiber for the past 7 years, and prior to that was at a startup in the Bay Area, and prior to that was a big softball player. So I competed very competitively in softball with the USA national team, and that was kind of what I did prior to entering this world that we're
What
in
position
today.
did you play?
I played shortstop.
Wow.
Yeah, any position, but shortstop was my bread and butter. So
Great.
that's my big claim to fame. I like to throw that in, and that's kind of where my roots come from is on the field, on the playing field. So today we're going to spend a bit of time sharing what Google Fiber is, and not under the assumption that you all know what our brand is, what we offer to customers, but we'd really like to spend majority of today talking about how we would bring Google Fiber to the residents of Cottonwood Heights, and specifically addressing our proven deployment methodology that we call shallow trenching. So before getting into that, I just wanted to take a minute to put a spotlight on our local operations. So Fiber is a national ISP. We are serving in 12 growing fiber markets, including growing here in across the Wasatch Valley or Wasatch Front in Utah. And we also offer high-speed wireless internet via something called Google Fiber Web Pass in an additional 7 major markets. Locally here, we've been established since launching Provo 10 years ago, and we hire a team that is served out of Salt Lake City, our office in Salt Lake City, as well as our office in Provo, depending on where they live. There's 3 core functions that we look to hire here locally. One is what we call technical operations. That's the team that manages designing, engineering, construction, repair and maintenance, installations, and repairs for our customers. Basically anything that touches the physical infrastructure is what we call technical ops, that we have a local team, boots on the ground here to service our customers. Additionally, we have a sales operations team that really focuses on market sales. So think door to door, establishing relationships with property managers across our footprint and real estate partners. And lastly, we've got our government affairs and community impact, which is Jacob here, that really works with you all in local municipalities, schools, libraries, nonprofits, with a major support in our digital inclusion.
As Ashley has mentioned, we're really here to work with Cottonwood Heights, and our perception is that the residents of Cottonwood Heights really deserve a reliable fiber network that is best in class, a residential service that meets today and tomorrow's demands. We've already done a lot of legwork here. We started back in August of 2020 in our initial conversations with Tim and I. And we brought in the previous mayor, and we talked a lot about what the impact would be of construction. And Ashley's going to walk us through a little bit of that on a deeper dive at the end of this presentation. But we also did a lot of substantial work with Shane and our attorney on the license agreement. And we were probably at a pretty close 90% red line world on that. We weren't quite solidified, but a lot of work had been done on that. And so those two actions give us a good head start, as well as our engineering department has a full design out already completed for Cottonwood Heights, because we were making such good momentum and traction on the prior 2 points that I just mentioned. The last piece that I'll also highlight in our efforts that kind of got us underway and give us a head start in Cottonwood Heights is we do have a long-term land lease secured for a hut, which would be a point of our network that we feed into and feed out of, that would predominantly feed Cottonwood Heights. And that lease is benefiting a local church here, and I think that they enjoy the financial partnership as much as the out-of-sight presence that we've been very considerate of in the location on where that is. So a lot of things have already taken place. And again, it's the methodology that we'll dial into a little bit later.
Yeah, so what are we looking at? Google Fiber is looking at making a private investment into Cottonwood Heights and building out the infrastructure here, not requiring any city funds to build that, because of the things that Jacob just mentioned with having land acquired already for a hut site, as well as 100% engineering completed and design complete of the city. We have a very fast track to first customer served here in Cottonwood Heights that we're really eager and looking forward to potentially furthering this partnership and relationship to bring the residents great internet service, which is bullets 3 and 4. And that's bringing competition to the market on speed, price, and customer service, as well as a best-in-class internet service. I can come up here and say all those words and means nothing. So actually go into the next slide. I like our customers to do the speaking for us. What you're seeing here is from PC Magazine. It's an independent Reader's Choice Award magazine, and described Google Fiber as the gold standard amongst ISPs. As you can see, Google Fiber has about a nearly 20 point advantage over the next ISP on the list. And with a net promoter score, which is also referred to as NPS commonly, above 50, we're the only ISP in the PC Mag Reader's Choice to qualify for best brands 2 years in a row. So that's just one nod there. And additionally, ACSI, which stands for American Customer Satisfaction Index, is another kind of industry standard survey that goes out. Google Fiber was ranked first in across 22 categories here, kind of proving that customer satisfaction can be accomplished by an ISP. And we're continuing to demonstrate that year over year. While we believe speed is one factor that we take great pride in and was an initial factor and motivator for launching Google Fiber many years ago, we also realize that's not enough. And some other factors that we think contribute to these scores include kind of free call center support, 24/7, 365. We target 90% of our calls to be answered within 30 seconds or less. And if any of you have called anybody, that's pretty phenomenal. I know I sit on hold frequently when I have an issue and have to call customer support. Additionally, when there are outages, we aim for service truck rolls within 24 hours. And I think our transparent pricing has a big factor in that as well. And since we launched our 1 gig service about 10 years ago now in Kansas City back in 2012, we have held firm at $70 per month for that product offering. We've also introduced on the residential side a multi-gig service, which is 2 gigs. And as households' demands continue to grow, we have capabilities within our network infrastructure to go all the way up to 10 gigabits per second without any changes to the actual construction. We just have to change out the endpoints, thank you. And the electronics on the endpoints is what I was looking for. And so we will continue to invest in our product development so that we can roll those high standards out as consumer demands grow. And 1 gig isn't enough, multi-gig becomes more, and we'll continue to listen to our consumers there.
You said the infrastructure is currently good up to 10 gigs. Is that just current electronics, or is that?
That's current
I was
electronics.
gonna say that shouldn't be the limit of the
No.
fiber itself.
Exactly. The fiber itself is future-proof. The limiting factors are really the electronics that are available today.
And we should add the electronics, not just that we would have to put into our network, but also what consumers can buy over the shelf and whether they're even affordable.
Exactly. Our commercial product offerings kind of mirror that residential product offering with a little bit stricter SLAs and service level agreements that we commit to, considering its business and has kind of rippling effects on outages or downtime that we commit to, which is pretty standard for across the industry.
I'll also click into, just because I'm a pandemic father and have a child that I love to take pictures of, he's 2 years old, but both the residential plans give you a terabyte of cloud storage included at no cost. And so
That's a
I don't have
lot
to
of
worry about
pictures.
how many pictures of my kid I put in there.
Yeah, I'll second that. My 2 little ones, there's just infinite amount of storage would do for me with all the
You all
pictures.
provide a router with that price as well.
Yeah, so
correct?
that's a great segue into this next one, which not all internet is equal and kind of not all pricing is equal. And with Google Fiber, from the very first day that we interact with your residents here, it's the same brand from start to finish. So before we go out and start any construction in the neighborhoods, we drop door hangers that say we're coming, what to expect on the roads and the disruptions of their neighborhoods over the coming days. All the way through to our marketing is all 100% Google Fiber, and all the way through to installation of that in their home and the ongoing repair, maintenance, and customer service. It's one brand that does that holistically, and our pricing is transparent, as I mentioned earlier. We don't lock customers in with long-term contracts. It's month to month. There's no provider change fees included. We don't have introductory pricing that escalates over time. So you kind of get hooked and then it creeps up after an initial period. And we don't impose any surcharges for modems or Wi-Fi routers or any monthly rental fees. It's all encompassing in that $70. Additionally, there's no construction fees, no installation fees or activation fees as well. So
And it's all in one bill, and it's really putting the customer in the driver's seat. And again, as much as we are an internet service company, it is really that customer service. It's the additional product that comes with Google Fiber.
Yeah, and I think one more click there is just products don't have data limits. There's no caps, no quotas, no throttling. So everything's there. So while pricing is with transparency in our pricing is a core principle, another one is digital equity. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jacob, which is right in his wheelhouse, to talk about our digital equity in the region.
So Google Fiber has an initial principle of not just getting higher speed and greater bandwidth to the household, but it's also about closing the digital divide. And the digital divide has taken on a history and moved into what is now called and referred to as digital equity. It's created it's a lot more easy to talk about now because of the relevancy of the pandemic and it putting a computer in the home for education, for employment, and for entertainment, whether you're streaming or calling family on it. We work with our community to build up those skills and to create those access points. And the three main investments that Google Fiber currently does as part of our being a community partner and community brand is develop community connections with our nonprofit locations and in some of our legacy cities that include schools and libraries. Here in Utah, schools and libraries are often already fed with a UENT fiber line and don't really need a second provider in it. So it's really that nonprofit that we try to seek out and support with a free gigabit or no cost gigabit connection so that they can do all of the STEM and STEAM activities that they want to do in their centers, but also so that we can bring in adult digital literacy programming. And we do partner with our libraries on that with lending partnerships, and that's the far right, the sponsorships and partnerships. We work a lot with the local community, and here there's a group called Utah Communities Connect that I've been part of since their founding. They work very closely with South Salt Lake and Mill Creek in the Promise program, and you can be assured that a lot of those effects actually roll into the school district and into this community as well as Holiday. And so we are working hard to make sure that these resources are usable and accessible to the community. The one in the middle is a Gigabit Communities, and this is an investment that we do with a low-income housing partner, and it's about bringing no-cost gigabit connections into each unit. There's an access point in each unit that then is supplemented with education by the property management. And the education is how to best utilize their device while online. Again, most often for education, employment, or entertainment. And the other piece that kind of is overlapping this that Google Fiber is getting into, and that you've probably heard a lot about in the last 18 months nationally and coming from the federal government, is the ACP program, or the Americans Connectivity Program. And that's a $30 subsidy for qualifying households that can be put towards their internet bill. It's very much similar to Lifeline, if you're familiar with the $9.99 subsidy that goes to qualified households. Google Fiber is still ramping up its systems to be able to participate in that, but we're excited by it because it would reduce our gigabit product down to a $40 affordable rate. But we also have opportunities to have a no-cost product out there that the $30 would cover. And so stay tuned to the development of that, but we are excited to utilize that resource to connect more families.
So that's something that a given household would apply to the federal government, and if they qualified. So at what level would a household qualify for that?
Great question. So most households are already pre-qualified if they already have a federal subsidized individual in the household, whether it's preschool and reduced school lunches or Medicaid or SNAP. But the federal government is saying it's a 200% poverty rate. And so for a family of five, that's about, for a family of four, that's about $50,000.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we've laid out a little bit about what Google Fiber offers, our values, and what we believe we can bring to the residents here in Cottonwood Heights. Before we jump into kind of turning into the shallow trenching stuff, I did want to open it up in case there were any lingering questions about our offerings or anything we've covered so far.
I did have a question. When you talked about this hub that you said was already erected in our area, can you describe a little bit more? Is a hub serving an area twice as big as Cottonwood Heights, or I mean, I just would like to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So it's called a hut with a T,
Oh, a hut.
H-U-T. Yep.
Okay.
Hut. And right now it's not placed here. It is ready. We have the land acquired. We have the materials to place the hut whenever it is, but it is here to serve Cottonwood Heights.
They applied for the
primarily.
conditional use and received it last year before.
Last year, it's only, I don't even know if it's been a full year.
Everything kind of just blends in, but yeah, that.
Yep.
And it would have the capacity to serve beyond Cottonwood Heights, which is great because if service growth came through density development, if a neighboring city needed more demand, had more demand and needed to be fed more, we could also utilize that hub for that purpose.
How big of a footprint could it handle?
It's more based on density than it is by geography, and plus light has a distance limitation to it. But if you're asking about the size of the footprint of the hut,
No, roughly how many, what's the max number of people you can hook up to those?
It's typically about 40,000 is the max.
Okay.
Yeah.
40,000
are
connections.
Connections, yeah. There are limitations though on as he was talking about, how comfortable we are with distance. So it would be a limiting factor of, from a distance of how much we would broaden that.
So you mentioned,
So
sorry.
please go ahead.
You mentioned you're in 7 markets with Google Fiber Web.
Web
What
pass.
Web Pass?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? Tell us what that is and what's the difference.
Google Fiber Web Pass is a point-to-point wireless option. And so you put radio tower on top of large, typically we go after multi-tenant, multi-family, large high-rise buildings. And then the radios point to each other and give wireless access within those units and within those buildings. So currently not offered here in Utah, but something that we have Google Fiber Web Pass in some of our markets, such as San Francisco, San Diego, Denver, Seattle.
Do you foresee extending into Utah in the future?
There's a lot of synergies going on with the technology and leveraging that technology, but here we are primarily looking at fiber to the home. That's where you can get the most reach, and that's where we can kind of deliver and service all household types and address types today.
So a question then that spawns for me is this somewhat perhaps the future to go to a web-based, I understand it, so wireless versus underground, would that have been?
So all wireless requires fiber to those access points. So it is still fiber to the building, and then it has a radio tower on top, and then it beams. So fiber is kind of still the solution and the end
Just
game.
not to the home.
Just not to the home.
Part of the reason why I asked that is one of our residents who had expertise in this area gave a comment to us a few weeks ago. And he said, wow, that's a lot of, capability coming into a individual household. He said it wasn't too long ago before that kind of, fiber network went into a whole business, a whole, large office. So, I mean, I get that we're using a lot more, but I guess what I'm trying to get to is, for a city like Cottonwood Heights, where I don't know what percentage of our residents would find a value in the kind of high-speed offering that you're doing. Let me just say, compared to, for instance, CenturyLink. Now, CenturyLink showed that the customers weren't quite as happy and all that. Well, anecdotally, that's the service that my husband and I use. Now, we're the boomer generation. We're not using, I'm sure, as much as younger generations. But the point I'm trying to get to is in Cottonwood Heights, we're gentrifying. And exactly what percentage of our households would be interested in spending more to get the Cadillac, so to speak, versus being just perfectly happy, with a lesser product, I'll just say. So I'm trying to understand, related to what our city might need, even though it would require laying some line to distribute it wirelessly, which I understand we don't have in this market.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously always trying to look out 10 and 15 years into the future, not just what we need today and tomorrow. And so that's where I was kind of curious when and if you might bring that into the Salt Lake County market.
Right now, WebPass is a better solution for more urban, old, dense cities such as San Francisco and where you do have much higher building structures. Whereas in Utah, we're still kind of a less dense community. We haven't grown up literally and figuratively in quite some time. And I think a lot of cities are just now starting to wrestle with that in the last 10 to 15 years. And so that wireless solution, even if you get into the 5G world, is really going to be for the mobile user, potentially for a part-time solution on rural development and getting to the extended areas out. In a city like this, and what we're seeing is that demand of having fiber to the home, individually fed, is sought after highly. And it also makes cities a place where remote workers want to come and live and enjoy and contribute to the economy. The growth out of that is important for us because it does allow us to have the ability to meet those future needs that we don't know how to explain yet, right? Or the wireless needs.
So for instance, since you just laid or are in the process of laying fiber in Sandy, our neighboring city, do those residents already have the opportunity to purchase and subscribe? And if so, at what percentage of those residents are jumping on this opportunity?
So we don't publicize our take rates for competitive reasons, but anecdotally, I can give you a story as well. A former CenturyLink user and recently signed up for Google Fiber. And the reason I did is because of the customer service value add and because of the equipment that I got at no additional cost to me. It's top-notch equipment and it feeds my entire house and I just get a better coverage. When it comes to price point, it's the same price because I was having to pay for not just my core service, but then my equipment fee, which actually put me above the $70 mark that Google Fiber is. And so when you look at that entry point of $70, it's actually competing with several hundred megabit plans that are operated by incumbents out there right now. And thereby becomes a more desirable choice. So I do think you would see a lot of consumers in Cottonwood Heights based on general demographics of education, age, and employment. Utah in general is a very high connected community. That being said, that was prior to Google Fiber coming in. Google Fiber is doing a very good job of reaching consumers in this very highly connected community, meaning that they're switching over to us.
Are we gonna, Mayor, are we gonna have any time to discuss this after the presentation is over, or is our time limited tonight?
No, so we can't, it's limited tonight. We do have a full calendar. So we have, we brought in Utopia, we brought in Google, and then we have actually, I think, 2 more scheduled. And then we will, as a council, have a get together after that, where I think we
I didn't
can
mean to, yeah, great. So,
make a
I think
decision.
you were-
So,
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Just conceptually, when you're talking about the wireless, it's basically to get internet to a particular building or site that may not be able to get to it underground. Urban
Yeah.
things are so common.
Exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah,
And so you're just bridging it.
exactly.
The geek in me wants to know what's the upper speed on that.
We have a gig offer. We have a
Yeah.
gig.
Through that, I
service
mean,
through
which
that-
means
through that
that
wireless.
radio connection is quite a bit more.
Yep.
In the ideal setup.
And yeah.
Okay.
We're going to keep going to get us to what we believe.
All right.
yeah, great.
Yeah, let's get into
I have
it.
some others, but they'll come up with your other.
Oh, great.
Oh, perfect,
Thank you.
perfect. What you're looking at right here is a map of license agreements signed. So these are public license agreements signed for fiber networks. Blue being Google Fiber, yellow is where Utopia is, and purple is Municipal network. Couple things I'd like to call out here is our proven track record of building out fiber to the premise in nearby communities is from the time of license agreement execution in Holiday and South Salt Lake and Mill Creek. We were able to connect our first customer within 8 months. As we've talked about, Cottonwood Heights is on a great trajectory to meet those as well, since we have the hut site acquired, hut materials ready to be placed, 100% engineering design completed, and we've got crews, construction crews north and to the south of us here in Cottonwood Heights that could flex right in and be able to get those customers connected quickly. Anything else you wanted to add here? Okay.
All those little blue lines mean you come across the borders a little bit, or?
Oh, that's just me using Google My Maps to carve out Cottonwood Heights.
Yeah. So upon typically what the process looks like in order to serve a community here in Utah is going through a design and engineering phase. Typically that takes 4 to 6 months engineering. Cottonwood Heights is in this bucket, but it's green. It's done. That 4 to 6 months is behind us. We are 100% designed for the city. Then we enter construction where we have a big chunk of neighboring cities here in that bucket where we've got crews out there and submitting permits, doing the construction, and then finally we've got those 4 cities at completion that are in what we call kind of an operational status. Construction's never really complete ever in a city because there's growth, there's private easements that we get access to, what we call right of entries or ROEs that we go out and we circle back and we build. There's areas that for whatever reason were unbuildable at the time that we were kind of passing through that we go back up and clean up and provide service there. So while I say construction's complete in those 4 cities, it's an ongoing thing as we meet the demands of the city's growth and changing environment that's out there and landscape that's out there in each of the cities.
And I'll highlight with the exception of Provo and a select percentage of Salt Lake City, all of that construction design and then South Salt Lake and Holiday being complete has been conducted with our shallow trench profile.
Correct. which we'll get into right here. I've talked a little bit already about our network architecture that we deploy here in Utah, which is forward-looking. It's looking out ahead to see what could future demands and consumer demands be over the time. And it currently can support up to 10 gigabits per second. But as bandwidth consumption needs grow, we can flip out those electronics at the endpoints and be able to do however much is needed with our architecture and infrastructure. To deploy fiber to the home in Cottonwood Heights, we use a toolkit of proven deployment methods, and it includes everything from traditional bore to shallow trenching. And we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about shallow trenching here. But our goal is to really leverage these tools in our toolkit to minimize disruption to the community and to the neighborhoods, minimize disruption to existing utilities and infrastructure, and deliver an end product that's resilient and reliable to our customers. So when designing and deploying and building our plant, we look at 4 main deployment principles. One of which, the top of which, is lifetime. So the plant should have an expected lifetime of no less than 20 years. This doesn't mean we put it in the ground and we walk away and 20 years goes by and it's done. This includes and factors in proactive and scheduled plant maintenance that we routinely do on the infrastructure to ensure the quality of that sealant and that the trench remains kind of in top-notch state at no cost to the city. We do that on proactive maintenance on our side. Survivability is very important to us. So our network needs to be able to survive routine road maintenance events and not increase any of your city's resources or risks here. That's why you see our shallow trenching profile is 8 to 12 inches deep typically. That's typically enough to clear any mill and pave initiatives and routine road maintenance. If you're doing large overhauls of road projects, we've got a whole team locally based that would work with you to proactively relocate that plant ahead of those projects. You're going to know about those for months and months in advance. We've got an engineer and a construction management and construction crews dedicated to this relocation work that will go out there proactively relocate it at no cost to the city as well. On the constructability, we want it to be easily constructible by our vendor base and meet all of the city permit requirements. So we combine our in-house expertise that we have of all deployment methodologies with a deep portfolio of partners in order to design, construct, and operate the network. And with that comes a very robust quality program during active construction. I think that quality of our construction is reflected in our really strong reliability scores that you're seeing show up in customer satisfaction that we previewed earlier, but also kind of our 99.9% uptime, which is inclusive of commercial power outages and scheduled maintenance. 99.9% is really the customer experience, right? What they are experiencing on their end. If it's a commercial power outage, it could actually be higher if they have a backup generator. They could still be online with us despite being out of power in the home. Typically, if you exclude commercial power outages and scheduled maintenance, you're looking closer to what we call 4 nines in the industry here in Utah, which is 99.99% uptime. And so by leveraging shallow trenching as that construction methodology, it also minimizes conflicts with other utilities during the construction phase because those other utilities are often deployed at much greater depths. So you're seeing less strikes, less disruptance during that construction phase.
Does the 8 to 12 inches is that determined by how much asphalt? Because as you do have multiple layers of asphalt, is that what determines if you go 8 or 12?
It's a part of the determination, but I think it is a static saw, so it's not dynamic. You can't raise and lower at that depth, so it will be conditioned based on what the road conditions are. In most streets, I'm sorry, Matt's not here because I can lean on him and ask him, but most streets, don't have more than 2-3 overlays. At that point, you're starting to get bread loafing and elevating cracks at the edge that it just needs to be completely repaired. And that's where we would coordinate our team with the city.
What is the longest? Do you have a city that you could give an example that's had the trenching for some period of time? Like what's the longest When did this
Yeah.
start to?
We initiated the shallow trenching methodology with Salt Lake City 5 or 6 years ago. 6 years
going
ago.
on 6 years.
6 years ago now.
6 years ago?
Yep.
And have they had the need to have you return based on asphalting challenges and such?
No direct asphalting challenges. I'll say on some sealant, we've had to go back, had our own kind of, we're out there. We'll actually get soon enough on the repairability, but one of those things is healthy roads is a healthy network is healthy roads. So we are equally incentivized to go out there. We're constantly kind of surveying the plant, looking at it. And so we have had to go back and do resealing of some of those to make sure. But that sealant is at PSIs that are kind of meet and flexing with the PSI of the road as well. So we're looking for something that is going to give and actually wear and tear just as the road would, so that it's not creating some artificial kind of movements and it could actually create more damage. So we're constantly evaluating out there, looking at it.
It's a really good question because it does have me reflecting now on why we do go out on repairs initiated by the city. And it is, to my knowledge, it has not been because of any asphalt damage to date. It's been more because of our plant being exposed or our sealant not fully adhering and us having to go back and work with the city on replacing that. That being said, that was in our initial kind of maturation period of growth in Salt Lake. And now it's dialed in that we're not seeing that same type of need in terms of going back and repair, which is great. It just means that we're honing in our skills. And right now that machine in Salt Lake is one of the fastest growing Google Fiber markets because of the team's ability to scale.
Was Salt Lake always the 8 to 12 in Salt Lake, or was it less than that originally?
It's a really good question. So we did start off with about a 6-inch profile. We do have in our history books a 4-inch profile that did not work for us in a different state, and it was in Louisville, and we compensated the state and we pulled out and we worked out that arrangement. But the 8-inch to 12-inch is the ideal range. The reason being on that 6-inch, by the way, is because of the mill and pave, and we weren't getting deep enough to get below where mill and pave would start to work. We want to stay out of the city's way. Any good question? I'm just going to tease
Yes,
with that one
from the
because-
utilities perspective, you're right, everything else is deeper. Sewer lines go way down, they're all through there. With it being that shallow, is it make it exclusive in that depth for a regular residential road? If somebody else, if another fiber provider comes through and wants to do shallow trenching, is that possible in the same areas or not? Or I don't know. Right now, this is the only one I've heard of this type of utility. So
It's a great
Yeah.
question. We do need to double click on that. This is only one standard, and this is when you're offset of curb and gutter, and so this would be in an asphalt cut. We do have a curb and gutter that would put us right curb adjacent where we have concrete and asphalt on the side. To your question, council member, I don't think that, fortunately, we're not in the position to have to legislate that decision. That would be my first point. You all would have to entertain an additional provider coming in, asking for permission to be in the right of way to cut into the roads, either adjacent or otherwise. But we also haven't seen the type of competition trying to move into this space. Google Fiber has a leg up on everybody, knowing that we started this process over 6 years ago and getting our teams ramped up in our supply chains to be able to feed those teams. We're out in advance of everybody, and there aren't a lot of shallow trench machines out there to just quickly procure. So an incumbent can't switch over to this method easily. And this does become a first point of entry. And in Business 101, that first point of entry is the prime space to be in, because you now have a competitive advantage.
But it would really come down to, I think, right-of-way access, right-of-way, kind of, it's probably a case-by-case scenario that it would be looked at. Nothing prevents another person from coming in and doing it. It might just make it a bit more challenging.
So Councilmember Peterson and myself, we actually did a site visit along with Jacob and Ashley to look at what the trenching looked like next to the curb. Then it bared out a couple, 2-3 feet, which would have been what you're talking about here, right? And then there's an area where shoots through what you call a missile, if I remember right,
that's right.
into the right of way to get into homes. And so it was pretty interesting to see what that all entails.
We're more than happy if anyone else is interested to offer site surveys.
Oh, I was interested, but they don't let me come when those two are out playing.
We get you, then we gotta
set up a
notice the
private
meeting,
one.
Scott, and then, you know,
Yes.
record it while we're walking.
Plus, it was a really nice day.
Well, there's
Scott.
no blocker on our side, I'll say. You'll take that up with the big boss. I just, we've talked about it in a roundabout way, but that last bullet on repairability, that is another core principle. We did hit on it a little bit, but for outside plant here locally, we hold ourselves to very high standards. When there are issues, there will be issues. There will be times where you encounter an emergency issue and need to cut our plant to get to your utilities. And for any multi-customer outage, so that's any outage greater than one customer, our SLAs that we manage to locally is 4 hours. And for any single customer outage, it's 8 hours. And that's kind of what we manage to here locally with vendors and our team on the ground here.
May I ask one question real quick?
Yep.
And then we'll get out of the technical elements on that missile concept that you use. Are there times that it does not work due to terrain or grade and you have to do cuts from that main line to the residences?
Not that I know of, no.
We could follow up with you.
That's
I'd
an
like-
interesting question. I've not
Yeah,
heard of it. We
I
should
have not
ask.
heard of it either, but I would have to go back to our resident experts here who's been doing it for many, many years to see if that's a situation. we
What are
could
the type of
potentially
things that
encounter.
would hamper that?
Just grade and I don't know.
If there's gonna be a grade issue or a rock issue, you're gonna run into it.
We're shallow enough and we
Around
stay
your
under the
sidewalk.
sidewalk enough. If anything, it may push the sidewalk up and we'd have to replace that panel because it like hits a rock and bounces or something. But in general, unless there's, you know, something super solid underneath there at a shallow depth, I can't see us, but let us go ask it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll ask on the shallow. We do run into some tricky boring situations where we do have to bore that we sometimes have to bring in like a heavier duty boring machine or things to get through it. But I'm not sure, and I've never seen that for these kind of bore shots that you're talking about, the missile bores to get from the micro trench or shallow trench to the softscape.
So with our benches of Cottonwood Heights being literally granite, my house is one of them. You know, whenever we try to do
Yeah.
anything, you know, it's like we're coming into all these big granite rocks. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious if you've laid this fiber in neighborhoods which are on the bench, which have the kind of thing that
Yeah.
maybe, can you
It's
give me an
actually-
example of
In the Olympus Cove area,
the Olympus Cove
which I
area?
think matches identically where you're at. And again, this becomes an advantage of the shallow trench profile is that we're actually going to stay above the majority of those granite rocks. And I certainly have seen enough of them at my house in the garage project. And if we had to bore or go any deeper than that profile of 6 or 8 to 12 inches, it would have been a long project and costly. And I think, you know, that's one of the highlights that we wanted to put up for you, that traditional bore is still part of our toolkit. We have to use it for street crossings and other unique applications. But we've also learned from it that in order to deploy an entire new fiber optic network, it is just too slow. It's going to have too many utility strikes that are going to impact your residents, going to impact fire and getting their calls out to those gas line strikes because you're at a depth and you're hitting, even though you've done all of your blue stakes and all of your marks, you're finding utilities that are off by 2 feet and you're striking them. The traditional bore method is just a slower, arduous, loud machine that stays in communities for much longer and costs a lot of money. So just go on the opposite side of that for shallow trench.
Yeah.
It's quicker, it moves through the communities much faster. It is still fairly loud, but it's just not there as long. The staging of it is shorter, and it is a cheaper methodology for us to be able to deploy.
To a broader swath.
So do you have a certain percentage of take rate that is necessary to crack your financial nut, so to speak, of coming into, say, Cottonwood High? I'm just making
Yeah.
numbers up, say, you know, yeah.
We definitely build a business case, and Cottonwood Heights is definitely something that we are interested in making that.
So you
private
feel that you
investment.
study the demographics and that you would make your.
Totally.
And what, do you have any requirements of the city financially or any other obligations that you place on the city to come in?
No.
being cognizant of time, I just want to make sure that we don't run you over, but bullet point 3 addresses your concern there, council member. As a private investment, it reduces and takes away that liability and risk to the city. And we're a partner in that private investment, but we're taking on all of that risk. And that's part of our due diligence and our business plan. But the other pieces to the puzzle that are important for Cottonwood Heights is the work that we've already put in, that sunk cost of engineering and acquiring a land lease for a hut. And then also the contiguous build out that is possible coming in from Sandy, coming in from Holiday. These are all reducing our costs to be able to deploy, as well as reducing our timelines for construction for Cottonwood Heights, all elevating why this is a great potential partnership for Google Fiber to invest in your city.
So we have about 5 minutes, just to
Well,
let you
that-
know.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna say, well, I have one that it really gets into a kind of a philosophical question, because you say it is private, you do fund it all, there's no obligation on our part. And you're talking about digital equity and all that is great and fine and well, and we've had Google for many years, up until a week and a half ago, we thought we knew what Twitter was, but now all of a sudden it's changed. Or it may change, we don't know.
Yeah.
Up until yesterday, we kind of knew where the Supreme Court was on some things, and things changed.
Yeah.
And so the question is from a political / long-term stance. I mean, Google is a private company. I mean, it's publicly held, understand that, but it is a private entity. And that's where it's a little bit different than, it's under different requirements and reporting and oversight than, for example, a publicly held or municipal type, where, transparency is mandated. Those transparency rates that you're talking, those things are mandated by law. We have to comply with those if we're on that type of situation, where Google is not, regardless of size. And so that's one of the things that I'm, yes, I mean, there's an off quoted, if the product is free, or if it's free to you, you're the product. I'm not suggesting this is the case, but it gets to kind of some of that. I don't want to be a tin hat, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, all that data is going somewhere, and I hope I'm trying to make sense. Where's that trust level? Some people would trust a private company over the government from running it a billion times, but that's where I'm kind of wrestling with.
I think I understand
With
part of the
yeah, with
concern
some
in
of
there.
this.
Let me
If
just
Google
try to-
goes bad, then we're all screwed.
Let me just try to tear apart a little bit. Google Fiber is another bet of the broader organization of Alphabet. Google Inc. sits aside of Google Fiber in the other bets lane. We do not store or keep any data on anything that you surf on the internet. We don't have server closets to be able, or data centers to be able to do that. We do practice and believe in net neutrality as a broader company of Alphabet, and we are stakeholders in trying to keep our internet open and accessible to the world. But Google Fiber is interested in solving fiber to the premise and really that residential experience of connecting to the internet to do what you want to do with your internet. And that is a premise of ours, and we've started off and we continue to carry this in our legacy of customer service, is that it is your internet. It's your service. You should be able to see what you pay for and not have long-term contracts that bind you and reduce your choices of competition. And that's why the private investment in Google Fiber becomes a good choice, because it does spur competition in your neighborhoods. When we are announced in a city, prices go down and speeds go up. And that's a benefit to the consumer.
We said utopia 15 years ago, and all of a sudden, other things got cheaper. We never even actually did it, but.
I hope I'm separating out the
Well,
data collection.
that
was very informative.
And Google Fiber.
So, and that's great, the tracking, this is an amazing device, and it knows everything about me. That distinction is appreciated, And then part of that goes into I guess there'd be some question on long-term on guaranteeing that it stays that way. That's
Yeah.
kind of, that would be the other hurdle that
I can follow offline with you as the White House just put out a publication on a digital foundation internationally. It's basically like a framework of internet access that the United States is leading out on and has about 40 to 60 other countries on. I think you'd find it fascinating about how we are trying to preserve your freedom on and access.
Are any more slides? We done?
This is it.
This
This
is
is the
it.
wrap up conclusion slide. So really, whatever questions were here.
you gotta ask this for him.
What?
Uh-oh.
He's not alone, but he is one of a,
I've already
Small
talked to him.
numbers.
I've already talked to him about it.
and what did they
Yeah.
say? They're gonna handle, because
Well-
I'm getting a complaint right now on another one in my district. They're down a lane that Comcast has never bothered with. And
Yeah, we did talk to them about
CenturyLink
that,
is
about them
probably-
running the trunk to the beginning, right? And that's what we talked about, and then we'd have to go from there,
Yeah.
right?
For
The-
private
for
For
easements.
private and
Yeah.
HOA and gated
HOAs.
communities.
the HOAs would have to pony up some, or just
They don't
they
have
have
plenty
to
of the access agreements.
They have
with
to
ourselves.
do-
Just access.
on a
That's-
lane by lane type.
And we would work with the city on helping identify those locations, because the further in advance that we know who they are or where they are, then we can make sure that we reach out to them.
Because they get left
And
at the end,
And that's where we've
the
designed up.
construction land, the construction time frame ending.
So what we do with that process, is we've designed 100% of the city, including these kind of private easements, but we have to unlock that in order to get permissions to go on that property. And so typically when we're ready, we have a sales team that reaches out to HOAs. We invite HOAs or private our right of entries to reach out to us. If they're interested in getting our service, we'll get that paperwork done and ideally get it into the queue before we even start construction in that area. And so that we can build it all
Well,
out
that's a
at
good
once.
question. That is a
Otherwise,
good
we do
question.
have to go back, and we have crews that sometimes there's just downtime. We'll send them into these ROEs, and we're constantly filling in. As I mentioned earlier, we're never 100% done with the market, because we're constantly kind of filling in for these types of.
So the 18 to 24 months would be all public roads and anybody you've got a signed agreement with.
Phenomenal, yeah. And I would be remiss, and I apologize, I didn't acknowledge the hard work that your city engineer, Matt Ship, has done along the way here, and really trying to be the best steward possible for your roads, and really helping us understand the importance and Cottonwood Heights in every city, top 3 expenses are your roads, and we get it. And so you have aging as well as new. And he's been a great resource in helping us out with that. And so I just needed to give a call out for it.
Great. Well, Ashley, Jacob, thank you. This
Thank
was very informative. I think we just appreciate your time. You've been very professional, and this was exactly what we needed to keep
Wonderful.
going. Thank you.
Thank you for having us today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And again, tours are welcome. But you just gotta get your permissions. Please let us know.
Yep. Anytime. Appreciate the
Anytime
time
it's not
today.
breaking the law, I'll probably
Jacob,
hit you up on it.
I'm gonna send it over. soon.
No popsicles or anything else, Scott, just so you'll know.
What about Tootsie Rolls?
What's that?
Tootsie
Not even a
Rolls.
Tootsie
even-
Roll.
Ah.
Okay, so next on our agenda, we would actually like to invite Ted Boyer to come up and to give us a report. Ted is an advisory committee member for Salt Lake City Public Utilities. And so we would love for him to come up and give us a presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and Chief Russo, and everybody else here around the table. So my name is Ted Boyer, and Susan and I moved up here in 1975. So we're pretty much old timers. And we've tried to be good citizens. We've helped with emergency planning, and I'm doing that, and also neighborhood watch with Assistant Chief Brenneman. But I also serve on the Salt Lake City Public Utilities Advisory Committee, and I thought, for the benefit of new members of the council, that I would give a little background on what that committee is. You all know that we get our water from Salt Lake City, but we don't get to vote for their mayor or their city council or anything like that. But we do have a mechanism by which we have a voice in affairs of the utilities department. And that is the Salt Lake Public Utilities Advisory Committee, or PUAC. Now, I've been serving on that for 7 years, so I'm in my 8th year. And it consists of 9 members. 3 of the 9 members have to reside outside of the city limits of Salt Lake City, but within service districts that receive water from Salt Lake City. So that would be us, Holiday and Mill Creek, and maybe some unincorporated areas as well. There's no really requirements other than you to be 21 years of age, that you don't work for the city at Salt Lake, and you don't sell either goods or services to them directly. And it's really been interesting. I've enjoyed serving on there, and I have, I bring some experience to the table, which I'll talk about in a second. But the duties of this committee, this advisory committee, it is advisory. We don't have rulemaking authority or adjudicatory authority, but we can make recommendations to Salt Lake City's mayor, city council, and the management of the public utilities department. But our duties are to review water and sewer capital improvement requirements, and also their maintenance and operations. We recommend rate adjustments as appropriate to the mayor. We review and make recommendations on proposed legislation that might help water. Lately, there have been a number of laws or bills introduced, fortunately didn't pass, that would danger or endanger our watershed at the canyons. They want to develop it, and they want run animals up there, that sort of thing. And so far, we've been able to have that off. We consult with the mayor on water resources and adequacy of them, and sewer reclamation requirements. We help the director of the Public Utilities Department to maintain development and operation and maintenance of their system. And then we have some hearing authority over riparian right issues, but we rarely deal with that. We've only done that 2 or 3 times in my 7 years on the committee. So my term ends in January, and so it's time to be thinking about a replacement for me. And the way that would work is the council and the mayor would make a recommendation to the Public Utilities Department and the mayor of Salt Lake City. There's no real rush, because there is a provision in the law that the sitting member of the committee can stay on until a replacement is appointed. We have a couple of people that have been on 2 years over their 8 years, so they've been on for 10 years, but I've been in 7 years. In terms of helpful skills, as you're thinking about who you might want to replace me, I think that somebody who has some experience with water rights, water resources, budgeting, rate setting, kinds of experience, political experience, legal, accounting, business, those kinds of things. In my case, I was recommended by Mayor Cullimore, and I was then appointed by Mayor Ralph Becker. And I know Ralph, I've known him for years. Ralph, yeah, Mayor Becker, and then approved by the Salt Lake City Commission. And as I said, it's been kind of fun. And I think one of the reasons I was recommended is that I have legal training. I practiced law for 20 some odd years. And then I entered public service, and I retired as chairman of the Utah Public Service Commission. We did all the financial regulation of the electric utilities, natural gas utilities. So I have a lot of rate design experience, rate making experience, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to just give you that kind of background and where we're at in terms of my term. I know you're probably interested in the water outlook for this coming year, and I did check again with the director of the public utilities just the other day, and they're thinking that it's going to be similar to last year. I think that the water is going to be the same as last year. The moisture content of our soil is higher, but we're still obviously in a drought, so it's kind of a problem. And what they are recommending for this coming year is stage 2 conservation, which is simply recommended conservation. They're not putting any really stringent rules or restrictions on us at this point. I don't know how you folks have done, but Susan and I have scaled back our water to water half what we did in prior years. We have our front yard is xeriscape, but we have some grass in back, and then we have a drip system in our garden areas. And the grass looked pretty crappy, I must say, but we did our part, and I guess that's kind of the brown is kind of a badge of honor.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yes,
Ted?
indeed.
So our water comes from Deer Creek, and if it was my understanding that Deer Creek filled up to a pretty normal level last year. Is that wrong?
It wasn't quite to normal, but
Okay.
it had quite a bit of water. Most of the water comes down the canyons,
Okay.
big little Cottonwood City Creek Canyon. The city also has some really good wells, very high producing wells. There's one in the avenues right at the base of the Capitol, on City Creek, that really produces, and we've just rebuilt that here in the last year or so. But we do buy water from Salt Lake Metro, we get water from Deer Creek, we get water from Central Utah Project, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's kind of where we stand. Probably the same as last year. No worse, no better. Although we love getting the rain today. And I thought you might also be interested in the proposed rates. Water rates have been going up the last few years, and they're proposing this year an increase of 15%. That sounds like a huge percentage, but when you talk about how much we pay for water in terms of dollars per month per customer, it's not too much.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you recommend that Cottonwood Heights go on a metering, or think about a new metering system that helps residents to be a little more keen on exactly how much water they're using, or more precisely how much water they're using?
As a matter of fact, in the current budget year, we've earmarked money for the replacement of meters. I got a notice within the last month saying that they had installed a smart meter in my house.
Is that a plan for all of our
For all of us,
residents?
yes.
And they're called a smart meter?
Smart meters.
And will that be reflected in the billing? For how
You can,
They sent it out.
You can electronic-
Some time ago, they have started that.
the smarter
Most of the events,
metering?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta take a look at that.
yeah, you can log in and check your usage, on a monthly, weekly basis and adjust appropriately. I haven't done that yet, but we probably will. Good question. So in terms of, well, they're projecting 15% increase this year, a 50% increase next year, and then much smaller increases in the out years. We have what we call inverted block rates, so that the higher users, people with larger spreads, pay higher per volume than those that are modest users. And it's kind of a disincentive. Now, the conservation things that we do are kind of a double-edged sword, because yes, it helps conserve the resource, but it also reduces revenue. And yet you still have to operate the system. Costs are, generally about the same. So that's kind of a challenge there.
Ted, while we're talking about rates for just a second, so
Yes.
as I was studying water delivery, I had a conversation with our former mayor, Colomar, and he actually brought up that there was a charge that as we began delivery into incorporated Cottonwood Heights, that would eventually go away, that has never gone away. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It sounds like you do.
They charge a surcharge, and it's about 30% surcharge for Cottonwood Heights, Mill Creek, and Holiday. And I've raised that question for several years in a row, and they finally hired an independent audit company to come in and figure it out. Because I figured, of course, you've got these the original cost of creating the system and laying the pipe and buying water rights and all that sort of thing. And so those legacy costs have been borne by Salt Lake City residents, and we didn't participate in that. But for now many years, we've been paying this surcharge. And so my question to them was, so when does it go away? When do we amortize those legacy costs and that sort of thing? And the result of the audit was that it's true that those legacy costs are being amortized, or they even have been amortized. But since we have no financial responsibility to maintain the infrastructure and so on, it's kind of a risk penalty. And they concluded that other cities and other states that have similar situations.
So does it go into kind of a rainy day fund then, or
No,
what?
it just goes right into the budget, just in the operating
So
budget.
they anticipate that
They
they will always
anticipated
get
that
this
plan that they
30%
budget for it.
surcharge.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound fair.
Did Colomar get it in writing that it would go away?
Yeah. There's really
Oh.
not much paperwork on it. I mean, because I debugged
No,
them.
and they've done
several
those
years.
same analyses time and again.
They
It's
have.
not- I mean, and it keeps coming up the same. I guess I'd be curious, do you have any idea how much Salt Lake City and now Sandy taxpayers pay property tax and how much that contributes to their budget as opposed to their fee schedules?
To our own budget or to
No,
Salt Lake City?
to the water.
I don't know.
I mean, I think that could be telling. I mean, if their property taxes equate to 30% of their water bill, then I would feel a whole lot better about the 30% surcharge. But
It's interesting.
because that's where that's where the claim of legacy costs, legacy investments, all those is coming from the property tax base that they are allowed to charge Salt Lake City, but they can't charge us. So that would be, I guess, another place to maybe.
A very good question, and I honestly don't know the answer to that one.
I think one of the big considerations is, being in a high desert, we still pay very little for the water we receive. And this surcharge is utilized for some maintenance, for some of the things that we would be otherwise paying for out of pocket as residents of the city. So we always have to consider that other side too. You can squash one thing, but then you open up the hornet's nest for something else.
But my question is what was it sold as? I mean, was it sold as a?
It was sold as there
advertised?
would be a specific amount of time
Yeah.
to even out the infrastructure costs that Salt Lake City did on their own, right? And so.
See, I couldn't find that there was any agreement with any, specific
I remember there was
dates.
being, I don't remember an ending being talked about, but I think comparable because as I understand the basis for it is we property tax these people, we don't property tax you people. So yeah, there needs to be some equity there because that should be covering the full cost of delivery. So maybe that's something that you or,
Yeah, we can ask.
yeah.
Certainly ask. But I know that the auditors focused on this risk thing, that we weren't at financial risk like the city is, and so we had to pay, premium like an insurance premium or something like that.
Well, the other nasty part of, not nasty. There is another solution, and that's what Sandy did. And just take Mill Creek, Holiday, and Cottonwood Heights and put them on the same level of management, oversight, and responsibility for the whole system as Salt Lake and Sandy.
Their rates are quite a bit higher than ours, though.
Who's our?
Sandy's.
That's
I wanted to
what
talk a
I'm
little bit
trying to say.
about the capital expenditures.
Yeah.
Part of the budget, part of the proposed budget, and because of the required maintenance and they're allocating $39 million for capital improvements and $9 million for water treatment plants, including $4 million for ours up here at Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I don't know if you've been up there lately, but it's really falling apart. I mean, the concrete is falling and you can see rebar sticking out and that sort of thing. It's just going to be a major expense at some point in time. But the whole Salt Lake City system was built in the 50s. If you watch the news today, there was a 16-inch main that burst on 13th South and West. And it was cast iron pipe that was laid in the 40s, 1940s. So they're, every year they're replacing and upgrading.
So Salt Lake City, though, is a retail customer of Utah Water Conservancy, correct? They are a retail customer that's then retailing it to us,
They
correct?
purchase at a wholesale rate from Salt Lake Metro,
From Salt Lake, okay,
Metropolitan Water. There's a treatment plant out here on Dale.
okay.
And they do buy from Central Utah Project, Deer Creek Reservoir and so on. Yeah, but they get 60% from the canyons and wells, by the rest. But the reasons for the increases, the rate increases are those infrastructure problems that I mentioned, capital improvement costs and maintenance costs, but also inflation. The cost of recruiting and maintaining personnel has become a problem. When I first started 7 years ago, they had people that had worked for Salt Lake City Public Utilities for 30 years, lots of them. They have an annual, honor your employee thing, picnic. And there were tons that were 30, 20, 10 years. And now they're moving, across the street for $1 an hour more. So that's kind of a problem. And then the federal government keeps imposing new water standard regulations. And so the city has to hire people to monitor and maintain compliance with those regulations and so on. So it's kind of a challenge, but I did look up some rate comparisons, and Salt Lake City rates, even with the proposed 15% improvement, are lower than Ogden, Sandy, Kearns, Magna, Riverton, West Jordan, South Jordan, Draper, American Fork, and Pleasant Grove. And then if you go outside of our state boundaries, our rates are lower than Boise, Denver, Cheyenne, Flagstaff, Phoenix, Reno, and Las Vegas. So they really are relatively low. A lot of people argue that we aren't paying what water is worth. I mean, it's a Staines line.
Does that include the surcharge,
Yes.
the comparison? Okay.
Yeah, with the surcharge, we're probably not lower than all of those that I just mentioned, but that their general rates are.
Okay.
So the surcharge, just to be clear, doesn't cover any infrastructure that we're talking about now?
It does, it all goes into the
Goes-
budget.
goes to the-
They allocate
Okay,
a
so
part of
we-
the budget for
But we
capital.
would have additional charges for that infrastructure, or is the 30% cover it?
The 30% covers.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't make special assessments or anything on us. That's kind of all I had to say today.
So your position, Ted, that you're looking for recommendations, for as your
Replacement.
term comes to an replacement, there's a compensation then for this position?
No compensation. It's
This
all
is volunteer
voluntary.
work? Wow, you have my ultimate.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Wow.
don't get compensated. I do a lot of voluntary work. I don't get compensated for it.
How often?
Except we meet monthly.
Monthly.
Yeah.
Do you drink a lot of water?
Yeah, I get free water. all
Do
the
they
water.
provide it for you at no charge at your meeting?
Free of charge.
It's fun though. I mean, it's fun and they're interesting people on there. Mayor Ted Wilson is one of the members. There's a banker, there's a former legislator. A lot of interesting people and, concerned citizens who are willing to do it.
So does Lara Briefer come to your meetings periodically? and
She's
so-
there every time.
Every
I was gonna
time?
say that should be her meeting.
Yeah.
That is her
Correct.
meeting. That is her meeting.
Got it.
We're not her boss, but we kind of oversee what she does and we make recommendations around her to the city council and mayor. And by the way, Laura is terrific. She's fantastically talented, really, really good person. She has a master's degree. And
Oh, I
years
know
and years
that.
of experience.
I know that. I heard just about every word she said while she was getting it.
Well, thank you, Ted. So let me ask you, so your term ends in January
January.
and there's not an option to talk you into staying longer, correct? You're ready?
Well, if you don't recommend anybody, they'll keep me on until you do.
Are you ready?
I enjoy it.
Oh,
I
okay.
still like it.
Okay,
But,
that's good to know.
give
I
somebody
mean,
else a chance,
we
whatever.
obviously have a level of expertise that would be hard to replicate.
Well, I will say, I will put on the public record that I was a neighbor of Sue and Ted
You were.
Boyer, and their son is the same age as my oldest son, and it was Ted Boyer who got me through the St. George Marathon a few decades back, right, Ted?
True that, yes, it was. a
Yeah,
while
so
ago.
I would love to see you stay on, but
Well, thank you, Ted. We really appreciate it. It was very informative and thank you for
Pleasure.
coming.
Thank you for all your service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on. We're a little bit, we got a lot to do still. So let's move on to our staff reports. And the first item that we have is a police department and public works fleet discussion. And we'll invite our administrative and fiscal services director, Scott Jurgis, to lead us in this discussion.
May I just
Yes.
say, you remember a lot of this information we presented to you in January. This is an update, and then this evening, you're going to be considering moving forward with some of this information. So that Chief Russo and Scott put in a lot of time and effort in looking at this as well. So a lot of this you've seen before with some updates that we're going to provide. So we'll probably highlight that due to time considerations, if that's okay.
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes, Scott, for this, so.
So really quick, basically, we buy a vehicle for an amount. We enter into an agreement with Ken Garf to sell the vehicle back for another amount. Whatever the difference is between those amount is what I term the depreciation amount that we need to cover over the 2-year period. So let's just throw a number out. If it happens to be, we buy it for 50,000, we sell it for back to them for 40,000. So there's a $10,000 depreciation amount. We need to cover about $5,000 in each year during the lease to cover that depreciation amount that that the vehicle depreciates over that time. In addition, there's an equipment cost on those vehicles. Every year there's some equipment, but every 4 years there's a full equipment trade out, mainly the lights and the sirens, but there's a few other items that we fully trade out on those. And then on the 2-year amount in between, when we fully trade out the equipment, there is a switching of that equipment from one vehicle to another. There's a cost involved, with that aspect of it. So whatever equipment cost is, let's say it's $6,000 or whatever, that would get divided again over that 2-year period, and we'd pay $3,000 in each one of those years. And so if it was, $5,000 on a vehicle that we needed to pay, and say $3,000 on equipment we needed to pay, that would be $8,000 we need to cover in a given year, plus any interest that would be borne on that whole purchase. So from a financing standpoint, we buy the vehicle for whatever the amount is. If it's $50,000, it's $50,000 that we buy that vehicle for and stuff, knowing that we're going to be able to sell it back for $40,000 at the end of the period, plus whatever equipment we add onto it. So if it was $6,000 of equipment, we'd need to finance $56,000 for that vehicle, knowing that when we sell the vehicle back, we'll get $40,000. And so we'd have a $16,000 carrying cost of that vehicle over a 2-year period. And then we'd need to pay the interest on the full financed amount at the beginning, on that vehicle over time and everything. So that's kind of in a nutshell, looking at a single vehicle, how that happens. And the main vehicle that we have is an F-150, whether it's a police vehicle or a public works vehicle, but there are a handful of other vehicles because the criminals kind of know we drive a lot of F-150s around, and we need to have a variety of other vehicles, both so the criminals don't always know what we're driving around in. And so we can just utilize different vehicles for different purposes that we have as well.
Hey Scott, quick question on the equipment. What's the life on the equipment that we reinstall? Is it twice as long as the lease?
4 years.
4 years.
Typically, yeah.
Radios, lights, all that stuff.
Radios.
Not really.
Not radios. What's the life on the radios?
Right now, we're on 15 years,
Really? Same ones.
same ones.
No, we used to replace the equipment every cycle. So we sort of get by with a 4-year
Wow,
term to cut costs.
that's great.
So anyhow, so that's kind of in a quick nutshell, in terms of, talking overall numbers on the vehicles. There are 42 vehicles that we purchased for police usage. And then this year we're adding 6 vehicles for the public works vehicles, the light duty pickups that they drive around in. So it'll all be in one lease, but we can segregate it into the 2 amounts. Public works, excuse me, is the first year that we'll enter into this lease. The 6 public works vehicles, by the time you purchase them, with the buyback and adding, what equipment that they will have on them, we will need to, let's see, the public works vehicle aspect is $285,000. The equipment is $19,000. So we have a net finance amount just a little under $305,000. The buyback agreement is that Ken Garf will buy those vehicles back at $240,000. So we have $64,000 that we need to cover during the life of that vehicle. There will also be an interest cost on that because we have to pay interest on that full 304,000 that we purchased that vehicle on. And so in the end, we end up paying, if you will, the annual cost we have to cover on those is about $32,000 over 6 vehicles, plus the interest rate. We had to anticipate that being around 9,000, maybe a little more than that. So the cost on those vehicles will be right about $41,000 annually on those vehicles. So if you do the math on that, it's about $7,000 per year for the vehicles, for 6 vehicles. Before that, just for illustrative.
Sorry, hold on. Okay. $41,000 for all 6 vehicles for the year.
For the year.
Okay, that's, there's a lot of numbers coming out without any guidance, so I'm gonna make sure that I'm.
Yeah. So for illustrative purposes, the last public works light duty pickup truck that we bought for about $48,000. And with having 6 vehicles in that rotation, if we buy one per year, they'll all be about 6 years old. There will be some recoup on that. When we sell a vehicle 6 years old, but a 6 years old vehicle used in public works will be a pretty used vehicle at the time that we sold it. We sell it, I think. Do you remember what we sold that public works truck
16
for?
grand.
16,000. We sold one for 16,000 that was approximately that old, and so on and so forth. So, we will recoup some of the cost, as we go through, but we do also have some costs that we incur. We had to put a transmission in a public works vehicle a little while back. That was about $4,000 that we, had to put into that. These vehicles won't need a transmission. They won't need an engine. They won't need those kinds of things.
They'd always be under warranty.
Yes, exactly. So, we'll pay about $41,000 during the course of this. That's about $7,000 per year per vehicle in rough numbers for the public works vehicles, so that we can have these vehicles and utilize them and then turn them back in at the end of 2 years, re-enter into a new agreement, and so on and so forth at that time.
Right.
Okay, so that's the public works side. So on the police vehicles, there's a lot more vehicles. Again, we're talking 42 total vehicles. Most of them, I think it's 34, are F-150s, one of those being a hybrid. We're trying the hybrid one out and see how it'll work for us. If that becomes something that can be viable in the future, we'll definitely look at doing that.
Ellen, you hear that?
So,
Good.
so all in all, the vehicles, just for the overall purchase price is about $2 million, just slightly over $2 million. The equipment that we put on the vehicles is just under $400,000, with then another couple items that we put on there. That the net is about $2,407,000 that we have to buy the vehicle up front. On the flip side, they'll agree, Ken Garf will agree to buy those vehicles back for $1,570,000. So that leaves about $800,000 that we need to finance for the vehicles and the equipment. And then there's an interest aspect on those. So, but that $8,000 gets spread over 2 years. We need to cover about, we'll just round it, call it $420,000 in vehicle and equipment cost in the 2 years. And then it's about $72,000 gets added on for interest on that. So our annual payment ends up being about $490,000. Now, our current payment that we're in, which is a non-equipment year, so they kind of bounce around about $100,000, is $338,000. We had quite a bit lower interest on that. We're down at about 2% flat on our interest on that particular loan that we had. So the interest that we're paying in the current agreement is about $33,000, almost $34,000. We're estimating interest to be about $72,000 on this new rate because of interest rates going up. That's one of the big areas where we're seeing an increase in the two. We're seeing a little bit of a creep in terms of the vehicle cost, in terms of, the upfront vehicle cost that we have to cover, in terms of the overall increase. We all know, used or new vehicles, doesn't matter what they are, they're all going up in price. However, we feel that they're going up and in a managed way due to the fact both that we locked in a lot of the pricing on the vehicles early on in this process. January?
Oh, I was in
October, yeah. Because we knew that there would likely be some delivery issues with some of the vehicles, as we all know that there's issues, trying to get vehicles right now. So our net cost year over year is about $152,000 net difference, with about what is the amount? About almost 40,000, about $38,000 of that being attributable to interest, the net increase. The other $20-ish thousand is attributable to cost of the vehicle and cost of the equipment. We are seeing inflationary costs on equipment as well as vehicles. So that's where we're kind of seeing that difference. We anticipate that from an overall, long-term budgeting process to be around $100,000. So in terms of the vehicle and the equipment costs, we're not far off, because we anticipate about 100,000. We're closer to 120. And then on the interest rate, we're seeing another, 38,000 roughly on that as we go out there. So the costs are up a little bit more than we wanted them to be. And if we were projecting a year ago, I wouldn't have anticipated vehicle costs being that bad, but vehicles costs started to get a little bit crazy, especially midway into the end of last year.
So our rate doubled on our interest rate from 2 to 4, or what?
No, we're looking at about 3 or a little bit more than 3. This is an estimate at 3%. I didn't actually pull the agreement from last time, but we got a screening deal. Literally, we couldn't have asked for a better timing of locking into our interest rate the last time around. I think it was as low as you can go, literally, in terms of our interest rate. Again, I don't have that agreement sitting here in front of me where I can quote you the amount. I think it was actually even less than 1%. I think it was 1.8%, something crazy like that. So I'd love to have that agreement again, but I don't think we can. So anyhow, and this is an estimated interest rate still. We have not locked into an interest rate at this point in time. We need to close on this probably the week of the 4th of July, which would be between the 5th and 8th of July, which means we can't quite lock in yet. We can probably lock in at the 1st of next week. So then we'll know our actual interest rate
Tomorrow.
So, yeah.
So probably.
So we're really close on locking, but we haven't been able to do it yet.
Great. So we could see costs a little bit higher on interest even after tomorrow.
It could. I'm hoping Mark can really perform some magic on us and get us a really good rate, but I don't know where that's going to end up being.
Great. Thank you, Scott. So we will move directly to the tentative budget discussion and stay with Scott and Tim. Do you want to start, Tim?
Yeah, I will start. Since the last time that we met, you have another staff report memo that Scott is going to go through. We've highlighted areas where there's more information that we provided to provide clarification on issues, as well as some minor adjustments that we were looking at that we'll talk through with you. But obviously tonight is the night that you'll be considering adopting the tentative budget, which from that point on until we finalize the budget and get it formally approved, you can make any modifications at that point. So the next couple of 2 or 3 meetings, we will have additional conversations about the budget. So this is definitely not the time, the ending point. This is where a lot of our conversations will begin. But we want to walk you through some of these changes and also some of the areas that we've really focused on. There were a lot of needed requests out there, but we also recognize that there are a lot of different costs that are coming through as well. So we wanted to really focus on reducing costs where we can, but obviously increases are there, and Scott's going to address that as well. So we're going to walk through the highlighted points and you can ask questions. We've also had a number of meetings. For example, when we get to that point, Chief Russo and Lieutenant Bartlett and I met with Beck yesterday and had some really good conversations, and there's some reductions based on our conversation that we'll highlight as well, that we'll incorporate into the budget. But Scott, I'll turn it to you.
Scott, no pressure. I know we originally allocated about 60 minutes. We probably need to cut that in half.
Yeah, we can get through it. I'm going to mainly focus on the changes from what we presented when I think it was our last meeting.
It was.
I get confused in
Yeah.
all the meetings.
2 weeks ago.
But,
We're gonna need to have a really serious budget discussion in one of our next meetings. To finalize everything.
I think our next one has a lot of time dedicated.
Especially with logistics.
Yeah, and we need to talk real
Yeah.
briefly, probably about logistics at the end tonight.
Yeah.
We recognize as far as
Yeah.
timing and that,
Yeah.
so go ahead.
So one of the things that we don't always express to you well is when internally in a division, we look at things and we go, oh, I'm gonna reduce this cost by say $2,000, but I need to increase this cost by say, $5,000. So the net is $3,000. We just tell you, we need $3,000 more. We don't tell you we did all this behind the scenes to try and, monkey with our costs. So what we did is we kind of went back and tried to address some of those areas where we have done that. We didn't get all of them, but we tried to get the ones that we easily could obtain and kind of get in here so that we are trying to look at our internal costs and where we can cut, we're trying to cut, and where we need some additional funds, we're asking for the additional funds. But again, we don't always do a good job expressing that. So we're going to try and do that a little bit better going into the future. So in the document that you have in your packet, anywhere where it's highlighted yellow, like in this area, that will be areas that there's been a change and stuff. And I don't know when you print it out, if it's printed in color or if it's just black and white.
It's in color.
Is it in color? Yeah. So anyhow, so as you look through and stuff, that's where it will be. So in the overall revenues in the general fund, we are not seeing any changes. As far as right now, we do anticipate having a change when we get the final rates for our property tax and our final new growth number. That one won't come to us until about June 10th or so. And so we'll get that to you as soon as we know that and everything. But we anticipate the rate to fall and there to be some number in there, between 50 and 100,000 for new growth. And we'll find out what that is. In terms of the expense changes, so we added a little bit more detail in our health cost increase. We settled in on an 8% increase. The initial was 19%, which would have generated $148,000 of net increase in our health costs. We looked back on several options, so on and so forth, and settled in on an 8% increase. The overall impact of the 8% increase was $68,000. Dental has no change, and most of this minimal amount was due to, dental had reduced no change. That was due to reduced utilization or low utilization from employees last year. But the $68,000 does come with an increase in both out-of-pocket maximum and the deductible costs. And I did not put in the individual amounts in here, and I don't have that.
It's $100 for the increase for the employees per year, and then the 1,000 for the deductible increase.
Moving down through, so this just kind of illustrates what I was saying before. We identified about $375,000 of either savings to the existing budget or requests that weren't recommended to be funded and everything. But there were other, savings that we just weren't able to quickly bring up and pull into here. So city municipal cost, this is a new cost. So the municipal court that we actually share with Holiday, it's Holiday's court that we utilize for our municipal court. They're having to increase some costs over there related to, I think it's their city attorney costs.
Not city attorneys, they're prosecutors' costs.
Oh, the prosecutor.
And they haven't increased that amount for a number of years, which has prompted the need to do that. And police has looked at that, Shane has looked at that, and we feel this is something that we need to recommend just due to maintaining the costs that they need to get the work done. It includes their daily costs, but it also includes when there's special circumstances, which we have sometimes, which we're involved in one of those right now, where we need to address additional costs associated with legal expenses.
Now, the costs oftentimes are offset by the revenues that are brought in. Very close, every year there's a little bit of a seesaw that goes on that, but it's very close. And so we will continue to watch that as we go through the up and coming years. In finance and IT, just to illustrate this seesaw effect in terms of cutting and increasing, Matt had requested $39,500 for inflationary costs related to software and hardware. The reality is we were actually able to find about $15,000 in some cost savings, and the net amount of the increase that was actually requested was $54,500. So what we had pushed through before was just a $39,500 net increase in that. We didn't tell you the whole backstory, if you will, on what happened.
Let me take 15 seconds and thank Matt for all he does. I don't know if you know, he sent out an email and let you know that we were being almost attacked with a multitude of emails trying to get people to click on to access our network. And he was aware of all those, stayed on top of them. Everything he does is so important. And we'll actually have more detail that I think Tim will talk to staff about what he's done. But thank you, Matt, for all that you do. And this is an important line item as we have to look at. So.
Okay, City Hall maintenance. We talked last time about would there be some cost savings related to solar panels here. So there will be some cost savings. We are not able to quantify that at this point.
I actually have some information on that I received this afternoon. So,
okay,
because we checked in and we're shoring up these numbers, but the costs on the estimated electric bill savings once they're installed and working is amortized over a number of years, but somewhere between 26 and 35,000 per year at this point. And then it's amortized, it becomes larger over a number of years, but we're making sure that these numbers are updated, but this is the latest that we have. You requested that at the last meeting and we're able to.
Do we know when we'll be functional with those?
Getting closer.
There's a big shut off in 2 weeks. That's kind of a last big milestone, but it should be pretty quick after that.
Yep.
okay. So I will get with Tim and once we can bet that number
I
out.
just received this afternoon, so.
Okay. Most of the other items stay the same. So in police, they had actually requested another $140,400 in requests that weren't chosen to be funded at this time. One was a mental health police officer at about $120,000 annual cost. And then other equipment items totaling about $20,000. Some of those we may actually purchase with some underexpend in the current year's budget. So some of that will be satisfied because they're one time in nature. And then the mental health police officer will have some additional discussion later on.
Is this a different person than the mental health or the therapist, whatever you want to call her, that meets with your officers? So this would be an officer who maybe goes out on calls where it's a mental health related. So that I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah, so it's currently done by Officer Hartley, and he actually did a presentation to your group.
Yeah.
Currently he's functioning as a volunteer being paid out of an overtime fund.
So some of the conversation that the budget committee had related to this is continuing to evaluate this, maybe even looking at this option midway through the budget year as well. So that's something that we'll consider.
Okay.
Unless the council wants to fund it now, so.
So Public Works, they had asked for 326,000 in terms of the total increases. And that actually is made up of a reduction of 83,000 with an increase of 103,000. And so that's kind of what netted to that. And so just to bring that part to your attention, some items and then an item that we chose not to fund is a right-of-way technician. The annual cost estimate on that position would be $63,336. So the overall expenditures with the slight change of the 20,000 to the municipal court is 20,000 or 20,562,000. The increase, 1,737,000. That's kind of made up of all the parts down in here. And then you see the added 20,000 for the city municipal court costs there at the end. So in the general fund, there would be a fund balance, a budgeted fund balance use of 1,220,000. Ending budgeted funding, ending fund balance would be 7,291,000. And that would leave about 5,137,000 available for appropriation at the end of that budget year. Now, the reality is that will probably be higher because we will have some under expend that will occur. That will probably be a lot closer to $6 million at the end of that year by the time you factor that in. Capital projects fund, I don't think we had any changes. Stormwater fund, no changes. Debt service fund, no changes. CDRA fund, no changes. I did add this little report back in. This is something that we try to put in. You can see the beginning fund balance in each of the different funds, the 5 funds that we have, the revenue that will come into the fund during the year, the expenditures going out, the transfers either going in or out. In terms of the general fund, it's always going out to fund the other funds. The projected ending fund balance that would be there, the change in fund balance, whether positive or negative, and then any restrictions. So in the case of the general fund, there'd be $2 million of restrictions, and that is outlined here down in this area. So 1,298,000 in required by the minimum fund balance, 5% required by the state, another 259,000 for our city ordinance, additional 1%, and then 595,000 for compensated absence for 2,153,000.
Do we know the last time that we looked at, so the city requires an extra 1%? Do you know when we looked at that last, Scott?
We put it in right at the beginning, just figured that the 5% was probably a little bit too slim of a buffer.
Yeah, and I've seen higher amounts than that with other agencies, so I don't know if that's
Certainly with
something-
other agencies, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, we just figured as a bare minimum, that was.
I mean, I don't think we're
I
not
don't
at the
think we've
point where
ever
we're
approached
there again, but I mean, yeah, it might be worth looking at whether we want to add 3%. So anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, Salt Lake County, I believe, on their general fund has a 10% amount, just to throw numbers out there, that there are other entities that have different.
UFA's at 8.5, they add 3.5 to the 5, so yeah.
So there are other amounts that you
Some
can do.
fee-based entities, that makes a lot more sense. Certainly ones that have sales tax are coming in and rolling and changing as much. It seems to be not as pressing.
Yeah,
I mean, Whitford takes that, theirs is actually, it's quite a bit higher, but it's also, I mean, if they need to do if they ran into an emergency or something, they can't, it takes them 6 months to get any kind of a change.
Yeah.
Revenue wise in, because it's all fees, so. But
Yeah. And then you see that, our projected available for appropriation fund balance would be a little more than 5 million. Like I said, that would probably reality be closer to $6 million at the end of that year. You can see the other projects. Another thing is in our capital projects fund, we are never able to finish all the capital projects that we have. So in essence, we have, I'll call it a cushion there every year, because we have, the funds are appropriated for a certain project, but we can never finish that project.
Is that weather, time?
It's a lot of timing is the big thing, as we're trying to do different projects in the neighborhood, especially the street projects, timing to get them budgeted, timing to get them into effect. By the time you actually start working on the projects that were funded in the prior year, it's about a year later, by the time you start getting down through them and everything. And
Maybe
that's just-
10% or something like that.
It's probably almost a full year's worth that we always have kind of in arrears as we move forward and all that. So, yeah. Let's see, in terms of the fund, funds that we have, our debt service fund has a large amount in there in our escrow funds. And that's so that we can perform that refunding on the 2014 and 16 bonds. that we did. That amount will continue to come down slowly until we are able to do the full refunding in 2024 on that one, and then that will go away. And then on the CDRA fund, we have about $1.3 million that is out there for the Cottonwood corporate and Fort Union projects that we can potentially utilize for either projects in those areas or go get agreements to be able to utilize those.
Do we have a percentage of how quickly those are growing each year?
This one doesn't grow.
Was it, well, I was just, is there a way you could maybe split it so we know which is
We
the
do,
corporate and which,
yeah, we do have the split between
well,
the two.
I'm sure you do, it's just not here.
I don't
That's
have the split.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah,
What's that?
I don't have the split.
I do.
You do, okay.
I have that.
Because I don't have that, so.
Yep, I have it. I have a memo that I could even send to you.
But yeah,
It
this
shows
kind of a
that.
report, that would be really helpful, just so we know. kind of
We'll
what-
include it in this report because I'll get the split.
Yeah.
So,
So anyhow, that's a new, well, it wasn't included last time. So this report, we have included this report in our budget and other things in the published budget that we do. And then it of course has all of the different items here in terms of the schedules for each of the different funds back here at the back. So anyhow, I'm not going to go through all those in detail.
so let me just add a couple of things. So one of the things that we talked about last time and that we've talked about in committees that we're still evaluating is the cost of living and merit adjustments. We built in amounts in this based on the 7 and 2.5 that we talked about at the retreat, but we still have a lot of information to gather from that. I'm still working on, and I've been working with Paula on getting where communities, cities along the Wasatch Front are related to COLA and merit adjustments, and they fluctuate completely. There's a lot of differences. So hopefully between now and hopefully the end of May, we can come down to an amount that the council is comfortable with, and council may have, I know the council has some ideas on that as well. In addition to that, we're gonna be looking at, we've talked about it at the committee level, market analysis of the mayor and council salaries as well as part of that whole discussion related to compensation. And so those are things that we need to talk about between now and the end of this month, ideally, to be able to get that set in place to move forward with the full budget. So we will do that, especially probably at the next meeting where we talk about the budget. The other thing I know we need to talk about are logistics. We are planning on getting the levy rate finalized most likely around June 10th. We have 2 council meeting options, the 14th and 21st of June, that we have to, at least on one of those days, have a vote on a budget. It's required by state law to have it in place by the 22nd. And I know that there's some logistical issues related to people being out and not. So we can talk about that more at another time, but we know that that's an issue. If you want to talk about it now, that's fine too, but.
We've got 6 minutes, I'm gonna figure out, I will be gone on the 21st. I'll also be gone on the 14th.
Allegedly though, because everybody,
Well, I could have
all the
another heart
robbers.
attack, maybe I'll be in the hospital. It wasn't a heart attack, which my wife keeps reminding, but you know, things happen. But so on best I can do on that would be.
So let's include
Zoom.
Could we go
Shane,
the first part?
So I know that the 14th, all 3 of you will be gone. Is that correct? You leave on the 8th, is that right?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I don't want to say the broadcast.
Well, I thought, well, I'm sorry.
The dogs are-
The,
The hounds have been
so
set.
the council meetings, aren't they in June scheduled for the 7th and the 21st?
Correct. Those are the
Correct.
2 days.
So we're okay on the 7th,
So
right?
we're all okay on the 7th,
Yeah.
and then you both leave on the 8th or something, and so I plan to be back in time for the 21st.
So we would have a minimum of a quorum here with the option of adding to Zoom to the, is that correct? Scott?
Yes, that one, I consider, I mean, that's like our big statutory responsibility is to get the budget done.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure unless I can't find a place that has the Wi-Fi that I would like to, I probably can arrange to be here, but Yeah, well, it's like. we're
Will you be
potentially have
at
three
my,
days in
my
November.
biggest problem is in
You'll
the
be in
air. I
transit.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
One of the flights was.
We
was
paid the
delayed.
$10 for your Wi-Fi and you can talk on your phone.
Yeah, that
Well, everybody
is definitely a
listens.
possibility.
Shane, is there anything you want to add? Is there, I mean, as long as we have a quorum, I imagine
We
we're.
have a quorum and everybody votes in favor, but we're good.
we're good. Okay.
A lot of
Somebody
this will
doesn't,
have
we
wrapped
got a
up.
problem.
A lot of this will have wrapped
So
up.
you just don't know what color eyes
Yes.
you're gonna show. If we got
So
those-
the
those
next, the
mischievous
21st
eyes.
of May work session, a majority of the work session will be dedicated to
Of
this
May.
as well as the 7th. So we've got 2 more meetings to really go
Hash it
through
out. Yeah.
and solidify where we want to be. And typically that's what we've done in the past. By the 21st, we're getting public comment to start, it will be next week or 2 weeks from now, 21st. And then we'll probably continue the public comment through to June 7th. So you'll be allowed to get the public comment. This will be available for the public's input as well. So we're going to have those times over the
So
next
we would
4 or
need the
5
7th to basically firm everything up, or it would all be over email
Yeah, we
Okay. we need. to-
hopefully in the work sessions, we can firm it up and
Yeah.
go to that.
I'm sorry, when does the public have access to the budget?
So tomorrow morning, after you consider the adoption of the tentative budget, if you adopt it tonight, which we're recommending, tomorrow morning, it will be available for the public. And then we'll have a public hearing on May 21st, which that hearing will most likely be continued to June 7th so that we.
Wait, I'm sorry, May 21st is a Saturday.
It's May 18th.
Oh, May 18th, sorry.
So
I'm
May
getting
18th is a
June.
Wednesday or May
Yeah,
17th? May 17th
May
is the
17th,
council
excuse
meeting?
me, I'm
Oh, no,
sorry,
I
I'm
just,
getting June and May.
Yeah,
mixed up
no.
in
Good
my
call.
brain.
Ellen.
So yeah, so May 17th will be the public hearing, which will be continued to June 7th. There'll be 2 opportunities for public input at the city council meeting. So,
and will the budget be then available on the Cottonwood Heights website? Is that how it works?
tomorrow
Yeah,
morning.
yeah,
Yes.
okay, got it.
and we also have hard copies that are available if people want to come in as well.
Great.
Just trying to think of the time difference if I could get on in Atlanta. But
Oh.
it depends on 4 o'clock here. Are they 2 hours?
Yeah, but it'll be 4 o'clock here.
Well, actually, it's the business meeting on the 21st where we have to adopt the budget. It won't be.
Yeah, so it'll be
8:30.
8:30 roughly.
Ooh, 10:30.
I might get in at 7:30,
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
but that's.
Yeah, that's, hey, but you know, sometimes they say, oh, your flight just got shifted. 4
Yeah,
hours.
yeah, believe me.
If we end up
it's
having
like-
to make some big cuts to District 1,
oh, well done.
That doesn't-
Scott, or anything else, or?
Just cuts to District 1.
I don't like that on the record.
So just in general, tonight, you'll consider in the business meeting adoption of the tentative budget resolution related to that, which will continue this conversation.
And this gets basically this presentation, this stuff formatted out so that for public review.
Scott, thank you. We appreciate your hard work. You know, I come in every day and look in your office and your nose is in that computer and it's amazing. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Okay, next on our list tonight is a review of calendars and upcoming events. A reminder of an Arts Council photography class on Wednesday, May 11th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. We have an Arts Council photography workshop on Saturday, May 14th at 6:30, and that is at the Old Mill Park. We have an Arts Council photography show, and that will be on Monday, May 6th, all day here at City Hall. And then we have, of course, Cottonwood Heights Butlerville Days that we're all excited for. And we still need volunteers and sponsors. And please contact Ann Etna if willing. We do not have any items to discuss in a closed meeting this evening. So I will, at this point, entertain a motion to adjourn our work session and move to our 6:30 p.m. business meeting.
We adjourn our work session.
We can do the business meeting at 6:30.
The motion to approve
There's a
from
lot of inertia. So we're working on it.
Councilmember Brack and a second from Councilmember Newell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any